Come to order. We meet today to consider three pending nominations. The three nominations are Ms. Laura Daniel Davis to be the Assistant Secretary of the Interior for Land and Minerals Management, Ms. Camille Touton to be the Commissioner of Reclamation, and Ms. Sarah Bronin to be the Chair of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. So welcome to all three of you and also with your families here today. So we want to thank you for the willingness to serve in these important positions, and welcome again to your family members. So with that, I will go through the nominees that we have. The Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals, Ms. Laura Daniel Davis. Management oversees four of the great bureau and offices of the Department of Interior: the Bureau of Land Management, the Office of Surface Mining, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement. All six of the department's assistant secretaries have broad portfolios and perform essential functions, but the responsibilities of the Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals Management are especially broad, and they are of particular interest to many members of this committee. Fortunately, Ms. Daniel Davis understands the challenge she is taking on. She is not new to the Department of Interior or the issues before it. She served as a Chief of Staff to the Deputy Secretary of Interior during the Clinton administration and as Chief of Staff to Secretary Salazar and Secretary Jewell during the Obama administration. She has been serving as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals Management since January. Ms. Daniel Davis will bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to the job. Second, we have Ms. Touton. I think I'm pronouncing that correct. Is it Touton or Touton? Am I right? Touton? I'm sorry. The same can be said of our next nominee, Camille Touton, who has been nominated to be the Commissioner of Reclamation. The Commissioner's job is to manage much of the water in the western states and oversee a vast system of nearly 500 dams and over 300 reservoirs on which over 30 million Americans depend. In addition, the Commissioner is responsible for producing 40 billion kilowatt hours of hydroelectric each year. It's a big job, but one for which Ms. Touton is exceptionally well prepared. She has worked on these issues on the House Natural Resource Committee and the House Transportation Infrastructure Committee, and on this committee when Senator Cantwell was our ranking member. She also served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science during the Obama administration and has been serving as the Deputy Commissioner of Reclamation since January. Like Ms. Daniel Davis, Ms. Touton brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to this position for which she has been nominated. And finally, we have Ms. Bronin. Our third nominee is Sarah Bronin, who has been nominated to chair the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. The law that established the Advisory Council was enacted in belief that the spirit of the direction of the nation are founded upon and reflected in historic heritage, and that a historic foundation should be preserved. The Council was created to ensure that other federal agencies take our national heritage into account before they take actions that might harm or destroy nationally significant sites. The Advisory Council is just that, an advisory body, not a regulatory one. It cannot command or control. Its powers are to advise, to encourage, to recommend, to review, to comment, to inform, and, most importantly, to educate. The 24-member council is an extraordinary body. It is made up of the cabinet secretaries and other agency heads, a governor, a mayor, the architect of the Capitol, the heads of certain historic preservation organizations, and several other historic preservation experts and citizens appointed by the President. The chairman alone serves full-time as the only member who is confirmed by the Senate. For this reason, I think it is especially important that the chair be someone of great ability and achievement, who will have the respect of the council she must lead and the agency head she will seek to advise and persuade. I believe Ms. Bronin's academic achievements and her record of public service show that she is well qualified for this important task. So I want to thank all three nominees for being with us this morning and for their willingness to accept these important nominations. So at this point, I will recognize Senator Brasso for his opening statement. Senator Brasso.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to add my welcome to yours, to Laura Daniel Davis, to Camille Touton, and to Sarah Bronin. I want to welcome you to the Senate Energy and Natural Resource Committee, and it's nice to see senators from Connecticut who are here to do introductions as well. Well, congratulations to each of you on your nomination. Ms. Daniel Davis has a long history working at Interior. She previously served at Interior as Chief of Staff for Secretaries Ken Salazar and Sally Jewell, and in many other roles. Currently serves as the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Interior for Lands and Mineral Management. Under Daniel Davis' supervision, Interior imposed an oil and gas leasing moratorium on federal lands. She has rescinded previously granted grazing permits. In March, she directed all Interior agencies handling energy and land management decisions to go through her office for approval. This action undermines energy projects on federal lands. It creates unnecessary bureaucracy and backlogs. It causes delays and uncertainty, and it causes significant costs and headaches. We need someone in this important role who understands and supports the need for U.S. energy security. It's all the more critical based on the actions that the House Democrats are taking on their $3.5 trillion reckless tax and spending blowout. The House Natural Resource Committee just passed legislation that will effectively kill oil, natural gas, coal, and hard rock mineral production on federal lands and in federal waters. If enacted, it would surrender America's energy independence and make us dependent on OPEC, on Russia, and on China. It will cost thousands of U.S. jobs, devastate communities in New Mexico, Wyoming, Louisiana, Nevada, Colorado, and Montana. We need leadership at the Department of Interior that recognizes the importance to our international competitiveness of maintaining robust energy and mineral development on federal lands and waters. Ms. Touton has been nominated to serve as Commissioner of Reclamation at the Bureau of Interior's Bureau of Reclamation. She has experience working at Interior on issues relating to the Bureau of Reclamation, including the Deputy Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation since January and as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science during the Obama administration. For much of her career, she served on congressional staffs, including the Democratic professional staff for Senator Cantwell, who was ranking member of this committee at the time. In Wyoming and across the West, there is no more important resource than water. Our agriculture, industry, cities, forests, and wildlife all depend on strong and healthy watersheds. This committee needs a commissioner who will work with members of both parties to strengthen desperately needed Western water infrastructure, to improve Interior's management of water resources, and to listen to state and local officials. I think that she is up to the job. Lastly, Ms. Bronin has been nominated to serve as Chairman of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. If confirmed, she'll be in charge with ensuring that historic preservation needs are balanced with federal project requirements. She will also make recommendations regarding historic preservation to the President, to Congress, and to the heads of other federal agencies. She currently serves as a professor of the City and Regional Planning at Cornell University's College of Architecture, Art, and Planning, and a professor at Cornell Law School. She has experience in the historic preservation field, including serving as an advisor to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. I'm interested in hearing more about her views on the role of this council in advising others on the designation, preservation, and rehabilitation of historic sites. So I look forward to hearing her explain her vision for the council. So congratulations to each of the nominees. I look forward to hearing more about your qualifications, your policy views, and your plans for ensuring the work of these agencies, and they will benefit all Americans, including those in my home state of Wyoming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Before I recognize my colleagues to make introductions, Senator Kane is unable to join us this morning, but he has asked that his letter of support for Ms. Daniel Davis be included. So I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a letter of introduction for Ms. Daniel Davis from Senator Kane. Objection? Without objection, it will be included. In addition, I ask unanimous consent to insert additional letters of support for the nominees from various tribal organizations, water authorities, and historic preservation groups, including two notable letters, one from former Secretary of the Interior, Bruce Babbitt, in support of Ms. Daniel Davis, and one from our House colleague, Dan Newhouse, the chairman of the Western Caucus, in support of Ms. Touton. Hearing no objections, these letters will be inserted into the record. Now I'll turn to Senator Cortez Masto to introduce Ms. Touton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my pleasure to be able to introduce today President Biden's nominee for Commissioner of the United States Bureau of Reclamation and fellow Nevadan and UNLV grad, Camille Touton. Camille, who currently is the Deputy Commissioner at the Bureau of Reclamation, has spent her career focusing on water policy. Prior to joining Interior, Camille served as the Senior Professional Staff for the U.S. Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, and also served as professional staff on this committee, the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources, where I got to know her in my former capacity as the ranking member for the subcommittee on the Water and Power in the last Congress. Camille was also previously a staff member for the House Natural Resources Committee and served as the Department of the Interior Deputy Assistant Secretary for Water and Science under the Obama administration. She holds a BS in Civil Engineering and a BA in Communication Studies from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and a Master of Public Policy from George Mason University. And while I know her heart is in the West, Camille and her husband Matthew and their daughters call Arlington, Virginia home. But Camille is a knowledgeable and experienced public servant who truly understands reclamation policy. She understands the needs and concerns of the people from the West. And being from the driest state in the nation, she understands just how important and vital water and water management is to the lifeblood of our western states. The West is in a prolonged drought that is increasingly exacerbated by the climate crisis. Our water resources are being ever stretched to support growing populations, and we need an expert in this role who has lived this experience firsthand. I know Camille will be an advocate for sound and thoughtful water policy, and I know she will provide a strong Western voice inside the Interior Department that is looking out for our water needs. And with that, I welcome Camille back to the committee today and want to express my sincere congratulations to you and your nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And now we're fortunate to be joined by our two colleagues from Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal and Senator Murphy, who will now introduce Ms. Bronin. Senator Blumenthal.
I'm deeply honored and enthusiastic to be here, and thank you to you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Barrasso, and all of the committee. You've detailed some of Sarah Bronin's qualifications, but we could easily spend the next hour going through all of what she's done in a truly extraordinary career so far. She's joined today by members of her family, her husband, Luke Bronin, the mayor of Hartford, Connecticut, and two of their three children, and their family and mine have been longstanding friends, and I'm very proud of that personal connection. I couldn't imagine someone better qualified to be the nominee to chair the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. She has demonstrated as a graduate of the University of Texas with a degree in architecture and a Yale Law School law degree that she has an understanding of both the legal and the technical facets that are required for someone in this leadership position. She has deep and broad experience in Connecticut. She served for 10 years as chair of the Preservation Connecticut's board, where that group has successfully championed the protection of many important community assets all over the state by leveraging funding, advocating, and forming partnerships and promoting stewardship. And that really is the mark of her service and understanding of the physical and tangible importance of these preservation assets, but also a devotion to equity and inclusiveness as core interests and values in her work. She's earned 3 preservation design awards for her restoration of a Civil War era brownstone in downtown Hartford, Connecticut, that her family knows well. And as an architect, she's knowledgeable about many of the more advanced technological improvements that are important in this work. She is a 7th-generation Texan, grew up working in her family's Mexican restaurant, and she's now a professor. She's been an architect, attorney, policymaker, and I think she is extraordinarily well qualified for this position. And I thank the chair and ranking member for considering her favorably. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Now we have Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is my inaugural appearance before the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and I appreciate you letting Senator Blumenthal and I just say a few words in support of our good friend Sarah Bronin. I think Senator Blumenthal has covered it well. We are fortunate that smart people from all over the world come to Connecticut to get their education. A number of excellent schools, one of them being Yale University. Occasionally, people spend time in Connecticut and then go back to their home state, as Senator Barrasso did. Sarah Bronin's affection for Connecticut was such that she stayed. She came to Connecticut to go to school, and she has been one of the most important contributors to our state's discussion around historic preservation and zoning reform during the last several decades. Senator Blumenthal said it, I think, very well. You really couldn't pick somebody better suited for this role. She's a nationally acknowledged expert on zoning and land use law. She's an architect, so she understands the practicality of buildings and building. But she also is somebody that has a history of being able to bring folks together around these ideas. In Hartford, the city that I live in, she was able to lead an effort to redesign the city plan and the city's zoning laws, and it ended up being adopted in a unanimous vote, which is not easy in a place like Hartford that has lots of different ideas about historic preservation, development, affordable housing. And so I think you'll find someone here who has the right background, the right expertise, but also the ability to take some of the politics and controversy out of these ideas and bring people together. So I'm just grateful that you allow us the opportunity to come and introduce her to you today.
We appreciate both of you taking time to come and introduce these wonderful people. The rules of the committee, you all want, I know your schedules are busy, so I know you have to be exiting here. Thank you all. Thank you, Senator. The rules of the committee, which apply to all nominees, require that they be sworn in connection with their testimony. So if you all will stand, raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give to the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. You may be seated. Before you begin your statement, I will ask 3 questions addressed to each nominee before this committee. Will you be available to appear before this committee and other congressional committees to represent the departmental positions and respond to issues of concern to the Congress? Yes. Are you aware of any personal holdings, investments, or interests that could constitute a conflict of interest or create the appearance of such a conflict should you be confirmed and assume the office to which you have been nominated by the President? Are you involved or do you have any assets held in a blind trust? Thank you. So let's begin with Ms. Daniel Davis. You're recognized to make your statement. Please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and members of the committee. I'm honored to appear before you as President Biden's nominee to be the Assistant Secretary for Land and Minerals Management at the Department of the Interior, and I'm very grateful for the committee's consideration of my nomination. I'm joined today by my husband, Mark, and my mom and dad. Our daughter is in her first year of college, so is unfortunately unable to be here with us today. My parents provided the example of public service that has guided me throughout my career. My mother as a high school teacher and later a high school principal. My father was an aide here in the Senate and was for many years a curator at the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. My sister and I spent all of our time outside when we were growing up. We were really lucky. There was so much open space in our community, and it was the beginning of my appreciation for nature and wildlife, which has such a positive impact on both your mind and your physical well-being. In addition to my family, the Department of the Interior has been one of the most significant influences on my life. The leadership positions I have held there have given me deep knowledge of public lands and energy programs, both onshore and offshore, a deep understanding of the department's operations, and the importance of collaboration. I first came to the department in 1993 as an aide to Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt. That's when I first saw how much this department touches people's lives in very real ways every day, whether we live in the West or in any other region of the country. I returned to the department in 2009 to work for Secretary Ken Salazar. Many of you knew him as Senator Salazar. He's now Ambassador Salazar. And I learned from Secretary Salazar to aspire to embody the servant leader model, which is that we never forget that our government service is on behalf of anyone but ourselves. As the department's chief of staff, I helped support the transition to Secretary Sally Jewell, who ensured that we were leading with equity and fairness every day. And in between my service at Interior, I worked in the House of Representatives for Congressman Mark Udall before he was one of your colleagues here in the Senate. Congressman Udall exemplified the bipartisan spirit that I value so much. And from him, I learned the key Mo Udall-ism, which is that we can disagree without being disagreeable in this work that we do together. And now I'm back at the department, of course, humbled and grateful to be working for Secretary Deb Haaland. She's inspirational, and once again, I'm learning something every day in my time at the department. My previous time there provided me with something of a bird's eye view of departmental operations and a really deep respect for the 70,000 plus employees. I rolled up my sleeves on a lot of issues from Klamath Basin restoration to the Deepwater Horizon oil spill response to ensuring that we were conducting tribal consultation in an appropriate manner. I also gained a real appreciation for the bureaus I've been nominated to help lead: the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, and the Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation, and Enforcement. I really value and appreciate the BLM's multiple use mission. It's uniquely important for resource development and recreation and providing economic opportunities for working families as it manages the federal acreage under its jurisdiction. Offshore, the important work of BOEM and Bessie to responsibly and safely develop energy resources on the outer continental shelf helps to assure our country's energy independence. And OSMRE provides crucial support to coal communities for reclamation of former mining lands and economic development opportunities, making sure states have the tools to oversee their transitioning programs. If I'm confirmed in this role, I'm committed to supporting these bureaus and to working with them to understand how I can best help them be successful in their missions and for the American public. During my time at the National Wildlife Federation, I was proud to help support the great work of so many of you on the bipartisan Great American Outdoors Act. That's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that you have given Americans to address maintenance needs across agencies and conserve and restore lands in our communities for access, recreation, and reflection. I strive to have an open door. I like to be available to different points of view. I'm always looking for information that can guide me to a more thoughtful decision. And if I'm confirmed, I commit to working with this committee, with the communities you serve, with states and tribes, and the variety of other interests in our work and the shared challenges we face. Thank you for allowing me to appear here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. I just noticed my colleague here has a cast on, and I was wondering what happened to her. I hope you're doing better. And now we're going to hear from Ms. Touton.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and members of this committee. Thank you, Senator Cortez Masto, for that kind introduction and for your leadership in Nevada and the nation. Thank you also for your guidance throughout the years. And thank you, Senator Cantwell, as well, for your guidance, and Congresswoman Napolitano. My name is Camille Touton. I'm joined here today by my husband, Matthew, my mother, Marlene, and virtually by our daughters, families, and friends across the country and the world. It is by the grace of God and with the love and support of my family and friends that I am before you today as a Biden-Harris nominee for the Commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation. From the start, my grandparents instilled in me the values of family and service to your community and to your country. My grandmother, Edie, was a homemaker with a high school education who supported all 8 of her children graduating college. My grandmother, Juanita, was an elementary school teacher who was later elected as the Capitana of the Barangay Tabung, Philippines. Both my grandfathers served in the military, and it is their sacrifices and their values that I bring with you today. The United States Air Force, through my father, brought us to my adopted hometown of Las Vegas, Nevada. It was there that I would meet the love of my life and also find my life's work in water. I recognized that my strengths were to take my engineering background and take and understand that technical information and communicate its impact to policymakers. This recognition and passion to serve is what brought me here today. Over the last 15 years, I've had the great privilege to be a part of every major legislation impacting the Bureau of Reclamation. This included my time as professional staff for the House Natural Resources Committee and supported the enactment of the Settlement of the Claims Resolution Act, legislation that settled the water rights for 7 Indian tribes and pueblos. I've had the great fortune of calling this committee my professional home and helped to support the enactment of Phase 3 of the Yakima Basin Integrated Plan, support for the Klamath Project, title transfer, and other reclamation provisions as part of the Dingell Act. Last Congress, I worked for the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and helped to support the enactment of WRDA 2020, the authorization legislation for the Army Corps of Engineers. The very same laws I've helped to support, I've also helped to implement and execute. During my time in the Obama administration as Deputy Assistant Secretary, I oversaw USGS and also led the Interior's efforts into the finalization of the MOU for the Salton Sea. I also led the completion of the Glen Canyon Dam Long-Term Experimental Management Plan. Since I joined the Biden-Harris administration in January, Reclamation has implemented 4 title transfers, funded the Drought Relief Act, recommended new water recycling, desalination, and storage projects under the WIN Act, and funded activities under the Drought Contingency Plan for the Colorado River. Each of these successes requires an understanding of complex issues, the ability to work across the aisle and collaborate with a diverse set of stakeholders, and it requires the ability, and more importantly, the desire to build trust and understanding with all of our partners to communicate intent, manage expectations, and produce results. And that's the skills I bring to you today. I also recognize the constellations of challenges ahead of this agency are unlike any before, and managing water in the West is complex, even in a good water year. The unprecedented drought has made the task even more challenging as major reservoirs are at their lowest levels since filling, and the prospect of relief in the face of climate change are not encouraging. But I am honored to work alongside our stakeholders, our partners, and the 5,400 public servants that make up the Bureau of Reclamation in meeting our mission in one of the toughest water years and during a global pandemic. The drought has very real implications on people and the environment. Farmers whose life's work is to put food on America's table are worried about the ability to put food on their own. Tribal communities who fear for the security of their water rights and the loss of species of cultural significance. Communities who see the low reservoirs and worry about their water supply. Ecosystem and species stressed to the brink. If confirmed, I bring to this position a proven track record of collaboration and communication, and I face these challenges with humility and a commitment to work with you, our partners, and the American public in solving these challenges. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today.
For Ms. Bronin.
Thank you so much. Is this on?
Yeah, now you are.
Perfect. Okay. Good morning, Chairman Manchin, Ranking Member Barrasso, and the distinguished members of this committee. It is my honor to be here today as President Biden's nominee to chair the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, and I thank Senators Murphy and Blumenthal for their very kind introductions. Joining me today are my husband Luke, himself a public servant and a veteran of the war in Afghanistan, and 2 of our 3 children. Our 3rd child is watching with her grandparents in Connecticut, and my parents, 2 sisters, and 2 grandmothers, Romana and Oralia, are watching from Texas. My heart tells me my grandfathers are watching from above. I bring to this hearing table the lessons of my teachers at Duchesne Academy of the Sacred Heart, the University of Texas, Oxford, and Yale, and of my students, and I am grateful for every one of them. It is a special privilege to be speaking before this committee, which has long demonstrated a bipartisan commitment to historic preservation. Senators, many of you are already familiar with the Advisory Council through the process known as Section 106. Both the agency and the process were created as part of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 to ensure that historic resources are considered when federal agencies are undertaking certain programs and projects. In these reviews, the Advisory Council does not play a decision-making role, but one of a convener, collaborator, and advisor. As chair, I would be honored to ensure that the agency continues to play this role with integrity and in keeping with congressional direction. The Advisory Council also has another key statutory role to advise the President and Congress on historic preservation policy. As I prepared for this hearing today, I talked with some of you and your staff about ways the agency may strengthen its relationship with Congress through this advisory function. Members expressed an interest in better tailoring disaster recovery response to historic places, developing procedural efficiencies, and better supporting the 59 state and territorial historic preservation offices, 574 federally recognized tribes, including 204 tribal historic preservation offices, and Native Hawaiian organizations. And you also expressed enthusiasm for facilitating private investment in preservation, whether through leasing or transferring federal historic properties, or through making the historic tax credit, which has generated over $173 billion in private economic development, more accessible to rural, Main Street, and underserved communities. The Advisory Council has already made progress in some of these regards. If confirmed as its chair, I will gladly work with members of this committee and others in Congress to further improve the federal government's effectiveness in these regards. My passion for preservation comes from the recognition that historic, tribal, and cultural resources benefit us in unique ways. They connect us with our past and give us a sense of continuity, identity, and belonging. They generate economic activity, both during rehabilitation projects and for many years after. And they offer us a chance to be more sustainable. As is often said, the greenest building is one that is already built. And perhaps most importantly, they guide our faith and center our spirits. Throughout my work, I have tried to ensure that communities of all kinds can benefit from preservation. As an architect, attorney, professor, and public servant, I have written, critiqued, and implemented laws regarding historic preservation. I have both rehabilitated historic buildings and advocated for them. And by participating in organizations like Preservation Connecticut and the Latinos and Heritage Conservation, I have found that there are many, many people who share our common commitment to protecting and celebrating the rich and complex stories that make us American. With this multifaceted experience, I hope to ensure the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation continues to take a leadership role in advancing and modernizing preservation practice nationally. From my ancestors' lands on the Texas-Mexico border to colonial Connecticut, where I live today, from indigenous homelands to fragile archaeological resources, the Advisory Council urges protection of it all. It would be a deep honor and a tremendous joy to serve as its chair. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you all for your statements. Now we're going to start with our questions, and I'll start mine with Ms. Daniel Davis. Within a week of taking office, President Biden issued an executive order that directed the Secretary of Interior to pause new oil and natural gas leases on public lands and offshore waters pending a comprehensive review of the Secretary's stewardship responsibilities, including climate impacts from oil and gas developments. Several states challenged the order, and in June, a federal district court granted a preliminary injunction against the leasing pause. The Justice Department is appealing the district court's decision in the Fifth Circuit, but the department has said that oil and gas leasing, both onshore and offshore, will continue in the meantime. So if you can give me the current status of the leasing program, and is the pause still in place, or has leasing resumed as before?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the question and confirming that the leasing program onshore and offshore is going forward per the court's direction.
Also, are we producing as much oil and gas as we were before the pause?
I appreciate that follow-up. And in fact, we are. The production has stayed at levels consistent with past administrations. And as you know, the pause did not impact ongoing permitting on legally held leases. So that has continued. The jobs associated with that have continued. So we've got about 9,000 plus permits available for use as well.
The other thing is, something that's bothered me more than any of them, is the review of the leasing program was supposed to result in the release of a report earlier this summer. But the report, as you know, the report still hasn't been released. So what is the status of the report?
Thank you so much for that question, Mr. Chairman. The report, as you know, is being developed as part of the comprehensive review that the President asked us to do under an executive order. We've had a really robust engagement process. There is a lot to review. Reports like this that come at the direction of an executive order do go through an appropriate interagency and White House review process, and that is where we are.
So it's in the White House as far as reviewing the report that you all have, or is yours completed now?
Well, it is
agency?
undergoing the interagency and White House review process. And of course, there's new information that is developed that we can continue to review and include.
And when should we expect it?
I'm hoping we'll be able to get it out the door very soon.
Well, we're past summer, so that means it's fall, huh?
Yes, sir.
But we're going to be asking for. We want to see that. It would really be helpful for all of us. Ms. Touton, we're fortunate that President Biden has chosen to place Western water policy in the hands of two former members of our committee staff, and we have a lot of interest in this, and they have dire need. I got plenty of water in West Virginia. We'd love to be able to ship it out to you all any way we could if we could get it there. But that's a deal. We'll put that line in. There's one pipeline we can all agree on. So I spoke earlier in my opening remarks about the number of dams and reservoirs the Bureau of Reclamation manages. But do you agree that the job of Commissioner of Reclamation is not so much about managing dams and reservoirs as protecting the water supplies that millions of Americans depend on?
Thank you for that question, Senator. I agree with you completely that my time in service to the members of this committee has best prepared me for this position, though I must say this is the first time I've viewed the room from this angle. I agree with you. As a Westerner, as a Nevadan, there's nothing more important than your water and the management of your water supplies. The Bureau of Reclamation is the largest deliverer of water in the nation. And so part of that is being able to utilize our significant infrastructure, but the most important part of managing your water supplies is working with your partners, with the states, with the tribes, and with all of the communities on this important research in the West.
I'm sure you're aware of the critical situation that we have out west.
Yes, Senator.
Okay, and the people that are dire need. We're going to have senators that will go more in depth than that, I'm sure. But anyway, we appreciate your experience and willing to serve. Ms. Bronin, if I may, if confirmed, you're going to be the 12th person to chair the advisory council, but only the second to be confirmed by the Senate. That's because over 50 years, the president was able to appoint the chair without Senate confirmation. We changed the law 5 years ago to require Senate confirmation and make the office a full-time salary position in order to raise the stature of the office. So recognizing that you aren't a member of the council yet, but from what you've been able to observe of the council over the past 5 years, do you believe these reforms have made a difference?
First, thank you so much for doing that. It will make a big difference in the coming years to have a full-time chair. And I think you did that as Congress in recognition of the fact that preservation, in addition to the full-time staff that already does a great job at the agency itself, really needs a full-time champion. The first full-time chair only served for 18 months, so I think we're still figuring out exactly what the responsibilities and opportunities there are. When Congress first passed the National Historic Preservation Act, it recognized in the statute itself that preservation cuts across many different federal policy areas, including housing, energy efficiency, transportation, taxation, and more. So I look forward to seeing what we can do in this role together, working with agencies, working with Congress, and
Well, all of us have areas in our state that have historic sites. Sometimes I've been told that it costs more to preserve one than it would to raise it and start over, but then you lose the whole cultural effect. But does that ever come into a place to where where the structure, the bones are not good enough to save it? You have to make those decisions?
The advisory council doesn't play that kind of decision-making role. It's up to the individual agencies and their stewardship of historic properties to determine. But certainly you do see cases of demolition by neglect. And that's one of the reasons the Historic Preservation Act was passed in the first place
That's
back
great.
in the 60s.
Thank you, Senator Brasso.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Prior to this hearing, each of you was sworn under oath that your answers to the committee's written questionnaire are current, accurate, and complete. So I'm sorry to have to ask this, but would each of you verbally affirm that your answers to the questionnaires are actually current, accurate, and complete?
Yes.
Thank you. Any of you ever threatened the physical safety of federal officials verbally or in writing?
No.
No.
Any of you ever been affiliated or collaborated with an organization that uses violence against fellow Americans?
No.
Ms. Daniel Davis, a couple of questions for you, and just please respond briefly. On balance, is it better that we develop oil and natural gas resources on federal lands here in the United States than import oil from OPEC and Russia?
Thank you, Senator. The president believes in energy independence and energy security, and so do I.
So on balance, is it better that we develop our oil and natural gas resources on federal lands than import it from OPEC and Russia? Is it yes or no?
Yes, sir, and the
Okay, thank
secretary
you.
has clarified.
So on balance, is it better that we develop critical mineral resources on federal lands than import critical minerals from China?
This is another issue the president has prioritized for us, yes.
Okay. On balance, is it better that we develop uranium resources on federal lands than import uranium from Russia or Kazakhstan?
Responsible development of minerals is important and appropriate.
On balance, is it better that we develop helium resources on federal lands and import helium from the Middle East or Russia?
The helium program is in transition, Senator, but yes.
And so do you agree that the department should not pursue policies that drive producers of these resources off of our federal lands and overseas?
I think we're strong supporters of responsible production of minerals on public lands.
So since, follow up on Senator Manchin's question, since the federal court's decision in June, it said you had to stop this, has the department actually issued any new notices for onshore oil and gas lease sales?
We have issued parcels. As you know, this is managed by BLM state offices, and they have each, where they have parcels available, have put them forward for scoping, is where we are in the process.
So you've not really issued any new notices for onshore lease,
No, sir,
specific
we're
of the
in
sales?
the beginning of a review process associated with.
Well, I want to talk about that because in February, a federal court blocked the Trump administration's decision to reopen, 10 million acres to hard rock mining. In response, the Trump Bureau plans to reissue 6-year-old environmental analysis, supports stopping hard rock mining. Separately, in June, a federal court blocked the Biden administration's oil and gas sales, which is what the focus is here. In response, the Bureau restarted its environmental analysis, which had been completed just last year. So and you said, no, if we're going to throw that out, all the money, all the time, everything that's been spent on these environmental analysis last year, tough. We're going to make you start over on oil and gas lease sales. In other words, your Bureau seems to be cherry-picking its data to suit a political agenda by the Biden administration. Now, you oversee the Bureau of Land Management. Why is the Bureau playing politics with the environmental review process under your current watch?
So thank you so much for that question, Senator. And I think it's really important to think about the process associated with oil and gas leasing, a process that ensures that we have relevant and appropriate and thorough environmental review, we have community input, we have appropriate formal consultation with tribes. And I think the way that we determined that we could be sure that all of those conversations and reviews happen, because I think, as you know, there's a lot of litigation around this program, and courts have found that in many cases the environmental review has not been adequate, and that has really impacted, in my view, certainty for the program and consistency. So we decided that the best way to be sure that we can provide that certainty and consistency and appropriate review is to start and have a fresh look and undertake the process.
So throw out all of the things that have been done in the past, block all the oil and gas, offer no new lease sales, delay a report that Senator Manchin, as chairman of the committee, just asked about that we had been promised to be done through the summer. Still haven't seen it. You said it's going to be here soon. We've heard that from other bureaus under previous administrations, and reports seem to be delayed indefinitely. Ms. Bronin, last December you wrote that we should rethink how we determine whose history is protected to begin with. The criteria, you said, and process for historic designation must be retooled. You suggested that oral histories, cultural narratives, and less technical descriptions of sites' meaning should suffice, instead of what we currently require, which is detailed architectural and social histories. I think you concluded your writing by saying, preservationists have started to see past the formalities that have too long prevented us from recognizing diverse histories, but we must go further to tackle the legal structures that devalue the stories we all need to hear. So if confirmed, how would you advise the President and Congress to reform programs like, and I'll give you a couple, the National Register of Historic Places, the Secretary of Interior's standards for treatment of historic properties, and even the Federal Historic Rehabilitation Tax Credit?
Thank you so much for that question, Ranking Member. So I appreciate that. And if confirmed as chair of the Advisory Council, our responsibility is to advise the President and Congress and other agencies about what opportunities they might have to change the rules. So you raised the Secretary standards as one example. That is the standard that is used to judge historic tax credits. It's used on federal projects, and it could be modernized. It has not been modernized over the last couple of decades in any significant way to address current challenges, including disaster response, which we're seeing a greater need for. As for the National Register, that too, the criteria have been in place for many, many years, and actually it's turned out to be increasingly expensive to get a property listed on the National Register. So in rural communities, underserved communities, you might need a little bit more flexibility, and that's one of the things that as chair of the Advisory Council, I hope to convince my fellow 24 members that might be something that we look at, and of course work with the Department of the Interior and the National Park Service to take a look and open up those criteria.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Daniel Davis, as you know, the New Mexico delegation, as well as our governor and our land commissioner, have really worked for years to protect the greater Chaco Canyon landscape from development. And I know that Secretary Holland has been a great supporter of that effort over the years. While we continue to work on permanent protection here in Congress, I believe that protection through an administrative withdrawal would provide necessary and important interim protection as well as certainty. If confirmed, would you work with myself and other members of the New Mexico delegation to consider an administrative withdrawal of that area?
Thanks so much, Senator Heinrich, and appreciated your letter on this topic, and I do commit to working with you and members of the delegation on this matter, should I be confirmed.
Thank you. Ms. Touton, the Navajo Gallup Water Supply Project is the cornerstone of the Navajo water rights settlement on the San Juan River. I know you're very familiar with this project and its history. It has the capacity to bring drinking water to 250,000 people, many of whom have never had drinking water in their homes before, and I think that's hard for most Americans to even wrap their heads around. But project redesigns, increases in expected costs mean that the spending cap and the deadline in the original settlement are likely to need to be extended. If confirmed, will you work with the Navajo Nation, the state of New Mexico, the Jicarilla Apache Nation, and the city of Gallup in New Mexico to come to an agreement between all these parties that facilitates the very important completion of that project?
Good morning, Senator. It's good to see you today.
See you.
As you mentioned, this project is something I'm familiar with and supporting its enactment when you were in the House and I was part of the Natural Resources Committee. And it's amazing because when we had the hearing on it, kids drew pictures of where they thought their water came from, and they thought it was trucks. And I know that you were just there visiting our staff this summer and actually tasted some of the product in the pipes, and we're actually getting some water in people's homes is where American children should think their water comes from. So if confirmed, I commit to working with you and our partners and the stakeholders in completing this important project.
I look forward to that. Ms. Daniel Davis, I also want to ask you, the Bureau of Land Management is finishing work on the resource management plan for the Rio Puerco district in central New Mexico. One decision at issue there is that plan, in that plan is whether to open an area that's commonly referred to as the Buffalo Track in Placitas, New Mexico, to new gravel mining. Now, it's an area where local residents, the pueblos of San Felipe and Santa Ana, the San Antonio de las Huertas land grant, the Sandoval County, the town of Bernalillo, and a number of homeowners groups all oppose new gravel mining in this area because it's become so suburban and because of the natural values that this last tract of undeveloped land there has. If confirmed, will you ensure that these concerns are given the consideration they deserve in the BLM's final decision on whether or not to allow a gravel mine on the Buffalo Track?
Thank you, Senator Heinrich. And we are, this is one of the couple reasons we are taking a harder look at that resource management plan. I know that folks have been waiting for it for a while, but the issues that you raise are incredibly important. And I understand that this area as well. We've had a lot of conversations about it and appreciate you raising it, as well as the importance of the Chaco area as well.
Yeah, and I frankly would rather get it right than rush it to a conclusion. Ms. Bronin, my last few seconds here, I'll direct to you. Every federal agency that takes an action that might affect historical objects or places has an obligation to review that action under the National Historic Preservation Act. But in my view, too often that review has been either perfunctory, it's been sort of a check the box, and often doesn't meaningfully involve tribal communities, even when the historical or cultural resources at stake are directly related to those tribes. As chair of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation, how would it be possible to hold agencies more accountable to those obligations under the National Historic Preservation Act, especially when it comes to actions that directly impact tribes and tribal communities?
Thank you, Senator, for your question. So as you point out, tribal consultation is an important part of the Section 106 review process. It's written into the statute and the regulations. The Advisory Council sees about 120,000 federal undertakings every year, looking at handling all of those with a great but small staff. So there's a few things that they're already doing. I mean, really, the Advisory Council's leadership in bringing tribes to the table has been recognized by other federal agencies. It's issued a series of, again, advice memoranda on sacred sites, on traditional knowledge, and on other aspects of the government-to-government relationship, which we have as the federal government with tribal nations. If I were confirmed as chair of the Advisory Council, I would certainly continue to ensure that tribes are consulted early and often. It would be a very high priority to me already, working with the National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, advocating for increases in funding for those groups so that they can meaningfully consult in an important way, in a meaningful way. These are things that the Advisory Council has long advocated for, and as its chair, if lucky enough to be confirmed, I would certainly continue to do that because, frankly, it makes the process better for everybody if everybody is given a meaningful chance to consult early and we avoid a lot of issues later on.
Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Daines.
Chairman Manchin, thank you. To start, I'd like to extend a warm invitation to all of you, if confirmed, to come out to Montana to see firsthand the impact of decisions that are made here in Washington, how it affects rural states like Montana. These decisions include the continued ban of oil and gas lease sales in Montana, which is something I'm very concerned about. Despite a federal judge telling the Biden administration to resume leasing, we are now 9 months into the year, and not one of the 4 required lease sales have commenced, not a single one. This is having a real and direct impact on Montana, on our jobs, revenue for our communities, and for our state. In fact, rural communities in Montana receive 50% of the revenue generated from federal oil and gas lease sales. So when this administration continues to skirt the law, it means that Montana schools, our teachers, our communities receive less money, and that is unacceptable. Ms. Daniel Davis, I know that you had a direct role in the leasing moratorium, and I hope you'll resume leasing as is required by law immediately. With that said, I want to move on to another important issue for the country, and that's domestic critical mineral production. Ms. Daniel Davis, the Biden administration has a goal to move the U.S. to all carbon-free electricity by 2035. Yet despite this, President Biden and our House Democrats have taken every step they can to make it harder to domestically produce the raw materials needed to build new energy and storage solutions. As you know, batteries, turbines, solar cells take huge amounts of critical minerals and materials. But in this current tax and spend bill being written in the House, there's dozens of provisions that would halt current and future domestic mining, meaning we'll be dependent on countries like China for the vast majority of the materials we need to build new energy sources. These anti-mining policies, they kill jobs in Montana, and they will further intensify the growing national security threat posed by our import dependence for these critical minerals. My question is this, if confirmed, what steps will you take to increase domestic production of critical minerals to meet the demand for this new renewable energy?
Senator, thank you so much for that question. It's nice to see you. The president has made it clear to all of us that critical minerals development and production is a priority for the country. There were, I'm sure you saw a sort of a series of reports that were released earlier in the summer that went to this point. I want to say how much I appreciate the support this committee provided in the bipartisan infrastructure bill for critical minerals related activities, research, and likewise at our own USGS, which would not be under this position, but it will be very important to helping us do a better job.
Let me ask a specific
Yes,
question on that. What is the administration doing then to try to bring some sense to what's going on in the House at the moment with all these provisions that would do exactly opposite what you just talked about?
So I do know with the reconciliation bill that it's a process that's ongoing. There are a lot of ideas being put forward with regard to reform. I know the administration looks forward to continuing. This is an ongoing process.
But you said they are doing all they can, and yet where's the administration at now? We need them to rein in these very radical provisions that are being promoted by the House Democrats.
So, Senator, all I can do is reconfirm to you that the critical minerals issue is a priority for me and that I do work directly with the BLM offices and the BLM leadership to be sure we understand what's coming in the door and how we can responsibly manage that permitting.
No, and I appreciate your voice there. Do you think the United States should rely on China? I think China becomes the new OPEC, if you will, relates to critical minerals and that important supply chain. These are countries that have terrible environmental standards, terrible labor standards, or do you think the U.S. should be the global leaders in critical mineral mining and production?
I believe that's the president's position, and I do support and appreciate that he's prioritized that for me and other appointees. And should I be confirmed, I commit to you all continue to work on this
Thank
issue.
you. Appreciate that. In the time I have left, I want to talk about what President Biden has done, where he issued a proclamation calling for increased utilization of the Wilderness Act. Ms. Daniel Davis, he did this at a time when catastrophic wildfires were threatening populations across the West. He did this under the guise of the 30 by 30 initiative. I'm advocating that we refocus this initiative on pursuing healthy landscapes, not ambiguous land statutes. Ms. Daniel Davis, why would the administration call for an increased use of the Wilderness Act, something that's under the sole jurisdiction of Congress, as part of the 30 by 30 initiative? And should we expect this to be the direction of the administration as they pursue this initiative?
Senator, thanks so much for that question. And I just want to pick up something that you said and say that the healthy forests and healthy lands is my priority and would continue to be my priority if I'm confirmed. As far as the 30 by 30 or America the Beautiful initiative, it's really meant to be inclusive, and it's not all about federal lands. It's about tribal conservation interests and state and local interests. But I really want to reiterate to you, with regard to wildfires and land and forest help. I think that's important to prioritize. I appreciate the work you did on the fire fix a few years ago. It has made the BLM and the Forest Service, as far as I'm told, are able to much better prioritize, appropriate treatments and management of those lands.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to nominees. Welcome to your family that are both here and joining us virtually. Let me start with Ms. Touton. Yes, we are going to start and talk about water in the West because, as you well know, it is an important issue we're dealing with right now. On August 16th, Bureau of Reclamation released the Colorado River Basin August projections, which, as you know, are used to set annual water allocations for both Lake Powell and Lake Mead for next year. And as expected, Bureau of Reclamation declared a Tier 1 shortage condition for Lake Mead. Under those conditions, the associated water allocation includes cuts for the lower basin that would be implemented in January 2022. So, Ms. Touton, what does this mean, this shortage mean for the western states? And if confirmed, how will you go about working with the Colorado River Basin states to mitigate against drought and adapt to water reductions?
Thank you for that question, Senator. First, I'd like to thank your leadership in getting the drought contingency plan enacted last Congress, because that was a tool that we were able to use that built upon existing agreements within the states and utilize it as soon as it was enacted to help shore up the levels in Lake Mead and Lake Powell. And those efforts, while we've declared our first shortage in the river, the efforts that we've taken under DCP have stopped a shortage from happening sooner. But what's important is while we have this declared shortage, the first one in the lower Colorado River Basin, it's also the first shortage that Mexico is taking under our treaty. It is something that we've planned for. And so in moving forward on how we operate till 2026, we commit to working with you and certainly commit to working with the states and all stakeholders that are interested in the Colorado River.
Thank you. And just recently, if passed, the Senate's bipartisan infrastructure package would invest $8.3 billion for Western water infrastructure, including $450 million that I was able to include to create large-scale water recycling facilities, plus $300 million to implement the drought contingency plan. Can you talk a little bit about how the BOR is utilizing these existing drought authorities and how you will utilize these funds in the future?
Thank you for this committee's support of the Bureau of Reclamation as part of the infrastructure plan. The $450 million in large-scale water recycling is a tool that helps us to build resiliency, because every drop of water that we can conserve or reuse is a drop of water that we can keep behind our reservoirs. Especially the $300 million in drought contingency planning and us being able to partner with the states to take on more conservation efforts and more programs where we can help to shore up these critical levels at Lake Mead and Lake Powell. And if confirmed, I commit to working with you and all members of this Congress to ensure that those provisions and all of the provisions in the infrastructure bill.
Thank you. And then the administration recently launched an interagency drought relief working group. Can you share with the committee the near-term actions that the working group plans to take?
Thank you. The Drought Interagency Working Group is chaired by the Department of Interior and the United States Department of Agriculture. And it's important because it brings our resources, both financially and technical, to target specific areas. A good example of that this year is us, the Bureau of Reclamation, bringing our resources to the Klamath Project, being coupled with the resources of the Department of Agriculture. And so it's just a good forum and opportunity where we can really target areas that need assistance and bring the full weight of the federal government behind that.
Thank you. And then Ms. Daniel Davis, thank you for taking the time to speak with me over the phone. In recent years, the BLM has spent an inordinate amount of time and resources offering vast acreages for oil and gas development on lands where the oil and gas industry doesn't really have any development interest, and on lands that have little to no potential for development. Making these lands available for leasing only fuels the speculation industry, and it really wastes BLM resources while locking up the land from being managed for other purposes like wildlife habitat preservation or outdoor recreation or grazing. So I introduced the End Speculative Oil and Gas Leasing Act that prohibits BLM from offering leases on lands determined to have low or no drilling potential. Do you think Interior should reevaluate the policy when it comes to allowing these low potential lands to be utilized and available for oil and gas leasing?
Thank you so much for that question, Senator. And I'm familiar with your bill, and I appreciate the points you're raising, and I do agree. I think that having lands that have a low potential available through the leasing program does lead to speculation. I think it is burdensome for BLM employees in terms of the review that's required. One other important issue I would raise is that we see in studies from the GAO that these two are lands that are not typically timely produced and such. So there's the return to the taxpayer that might otherwise be available as lands go into production and revenue is produced that's then shared with states. As you know, for some conservation programs, you don't get there. And I think that's really important as well, because that's sort of one of the signal priorities for the administration is to be sure that this oil and gas leasing program provides a fair return to the taxpayer. I think that's lacking too, and I appreciate, and I think you're on the completely right track on this issue.
Thank you. I know my time is up. I will submit the rest of my questions for the record for the nominees. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hyde-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses willing to testify and participate in this process today. And if you're confirmed, your energy going forward is certainly appreciated and admired. My question will be for Mrs. Daniel Davis. As we have already discussed, and most of us are aware of, federal onshore and offshore oil and gas leasing has been under attack from the Biden administration moratoriums. For offshore leasing, there is still more to be done in order to fully comply with the Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act and to ensure that the 5-year plan is completed before a quickly approaching deadline that we've discussed. The Gulf of Mexico is vital to our nation's energy security by providing approximately 20% of Americans' oil and natural gas production. Given the detrimental impact that pausing offshore oil and gas leasing has for Gulf Coast states such as Mississippi and the nation, how do you view the Gulf of Mexico in terms of American oil and gas production now and in the future?
Thank you so much, Senator, for that question. And I do want to note, and as you know, that leasing has moved forward with the next Gulf lease sale. And what we have also seen is that with regard to activity in the Gulf, that production has continued at historic levels, sometimes higher, sometimes lower than we saw in the previous administration. And I think it is certainly accurate that the Gulf of Mexico oil and gas activity is sort of the locus of offshore activity in America. And I think I'll sort of refer to what the Secretary said one of the times, or maybe more than one of the times she appeared here, that oil and gas is going to remain a part of our economy for some time.
Thank you. And while serving as Chief of Policy and Advocacy at the National Wildlife Federation, you stated, the wildly popular Land and Water Conservation Fund is America's most successful and effective tool for keeping nature and wildlife within reach for millions of Americans. As I am sure you're aware of, the primary source of revenue for the Land and Water Conservation Fund is from federal oil and gas leases on the Outer Continental Shelf. If confirmed, how do you intend to ensure continued funding for important conservation efforts like LWCF when moratoriums restrict energy production and correlating royalty payments to the federal government?
Thank you, Senator, and I stand by those words and really the importance of the Land and Water Conservation Fund and making wildlife and special places available for our kids and grandkids. We have resumed leasing and permitting and production has stayed apace. So I'm not aware of any impacts to revenue with regard to those programs, or of course revenue that goes to the states under those programs. And with leasing having resumed and production ongoing, I think we're positioned well to support those programs.
And my third question, as my time is dwindling, Congress enacted the Outer Continental Shelf Land Act primarily to facilitate the federal government's leasing of its offshore mineral resources and energy resources. In this law, Congress stated expressly that offshore resources should be made available for expeditious and orderly development. What assurances will you give us that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management will not impose burdensome stipulations that make new leases economically unfeasible and therefore effectively unavailable for development, contrary to clear congressional intent?
Thank you very much, Senator. And I think what I would say is that, that my management approach is to always be sure that the actions that I'm taking and that bureaus are taking that I might be overseeing are in compliance with the law. OXLA, as you know, has a very complex set of factors that get taken into account, and they sort of point you toward consideration of a lot of different equities, including, development appropriateness, where the resource is, consideration of, marine wildlife, marine habitat, community engagement. So what I like to think of when I think of that program is that to be sure that in the conversations that I'm having with the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management and with the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement on the permitting side, that they are taking all of that into consideration and following the law. And my sense is that's very much where those bureaus are every day moving forward with implementing the law.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Cantwell is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, congratulations to all the nominees. Ms. Touton, thank you for your hard work on the Yakima Basin Integrated Plan and for understanding a holistic approach to water issues. Obviously, this past few years has gotten everybody focused on the fact that we have a warmer but wetter environment. For us, that means less snowpack, and that means even for us with a state that's 70% reliant on hydro, that you have to do something else. If it's not going to be stored on top of the mountains, where is it going to be stored? So aquifers, I believe, are one of the things that could help us. Senator Risch and I created a program in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that would allow Bureau of Reclamation to help states manage aquifers through aquifer recharge and developing alternative water sources. Can you talk about what you think that might do for the West? Are you supportive of this language? And what do you think aquifers can really do in helping us on this changing environment?
Good morning, Senator. It's good to see you again. I learned from you that it's important to look at water storage, both as surface but also at groundwater storage. And one of the things that we looked at, that we completed just this summer, was EL 47.5, which is an important pump station for the Odessa sub-aquifer, a partnership we have with Washington State Ecology to bring more resiliency to that system and less reliability and management of less reliability on groundwater, but co-management of groundwater and surface water. And so thank you for your support in those provisions in the bipartisan infrastructure framework. Washington State has been the model in being able to use groundwater and surface water. And should I be confirmed, I look forward to working with you to enact that law.
So I take it you support the aquifer provisions.
Yes,
to me,
Senator.
this seems like a layup. This seems like, we're a state with a lot of snowpack and a hydro system, so we're very keen on what we can do on these resources. Do you think that these kinds of programs hold value for, other states as a very cost-effective, simple way to help us with, again, what is by the scientists are saying are warmer and wetter conditions?
I certainly think that other states could utilize this authority to be able to manage their water resources.
Okay. And what do you think that we need to do on the holistic front to stimulate more? What was so amazing on the Yakima Basin, these were people that literally chose not to go the legal route and fight each other for decades, but chose, even though they had varying views oftentimes, at conflict with each other, chose to work together collaboratively and came up with a more holistic approach. What else do we need to be doing to encourage that holistic approach?
The Yakima Basin Integrated Plan is the model for the West. It balances the needs of agriculture, along with the restoration of the largest salmon run in the continental United States, and values the cultural significance of the Yakama Nation. And so moving forward, we need to be able to support these type of activities that look at agriculture, that look at ecosystem, that look at cultural resources, and move those forward. That is a provision that you worked on, that was worked on in the House with Congressman Newhouse. And so if confirmed, I look forward to working with you in implementing that, but also that type of model across the West.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And now we have Senator Marshall.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, so much. My first question for Ms. Bronin. The Chisholm Trail started in 1885. It's originated in Red River Station in San Antonio, Texas. It weaved through Texas and Oklahoma and through some famous cattle cities in Kansas, including Dodge and Wellington and Wichita and Ellsworth. And then it ended at a railroad head in Abilene, Kansas, the home of our 34th President, Dwight David Eisenhower. Additionally, not one but two films starring John Wayne were made about the Chisholm Trail. And it would be my humble opinion that any trail in which John Wayne made two movies about deserves to be on the National Historic Trail, and was wondering if you would help us support that project.
Senator, that sounds like a very fun activity to be doing as chair of the advisory council. And certainly my son and husband, who love these kinds of movies, who are here today with me, would agree that it would be something that we'd be happy to work with your office to consider putting on that list, and I appreciate the question.
Well, that's great. A 1948 movie and a 1970 movie by the Duke has to be on everyone's watch list, so I hope you
Sure they
enjoy them. My next question for Ms. Daniel Davis, and I'm looking for a simple yes or no here. Do you agree that public service is a public trust?
Yes, Senator.
I'm glad you agree. It's important for the public to be able to trust their appointed officials in government and looking out for the public interest. When appointees work on issues that they have advocated for on behalf of private groups in the past, it erodes the public confidence that appointees can separate themselves from their previous work. A recent E&E News article discussed BLM's Deputy Director of Policy, concerned about an IG investigation to whether a political appointee at DOI has violated ethic laws while working on issues pertaining to Alaska, raised my concerns, and these important ethical requirements are being ignored and not taken as seriously as they should be. Ms. Daniel Davis, have you ever sought or planned to seek a waiver or impartiality determination pertaining to your former employer?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. And I have been guided every step of the way since I rejoined the department in January by our ethics official. I am formally recused from my interactions with the National Wildlife Federation. And moreover, I just want to be sure that you know and that everyone knows that the Secretary has made it very clear to all of us her expectations that we will be regularly engaged with the ethics lawyers and follow their advice carefully.
And then as a supervisor, is it your responsibility to ensure that employees under you understand and take ethics requirements seriously?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I want to talk about energy policy for a second, and listing some of your answers to Ranking Member Barrasso about, the goals of energy policy. And if I paraphrase, I thought I heard you say that you think American energy independence is a good thing. If we look at where we are right now in America, that we're importing more oil from Russia than Alaska, that we're asking OPEC to make more oil, that the price of gasoline is up, 40%, I would suppose, since this administration took over. Would you think that what from the policies, White House policies, has driven those results?
I think I'm probably most comfortable talking about the Department of the Interior and what we're doing there. And of course, the President did ask us to undertake a comprehensive review of the oil and gas leasing system, be sure that it was providing a fair return to the taxpayer, and that also it was accounting for climate costs. I think it's really important that we undertake that review. The program, there have been a lot of reviews over the years, independent reviews from the GAO, from our own IG, that suggest that that the program could use some modernization, both on the fiscal terms and in how it undertakes environmental reviews. And that's really what we're focused on. And I think I would hope and imagine that any type of modernization would improve the program and its engagement with.
One more quick question in my time limit here. When we compare mining minerals in the United States versus China, apples and apples as best you can, is there a difference in the environmental impact the way China mines minerals versus the standards and the environmental impact of mining minerals in the United States?
So I think the president's charge to us is to develop critical minerals in a responsible fashion that takes into account the environment, the laws, community input, and that is what we are seeking to do.
Thank you, Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Now we have Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I first want to thank everybody for your public service and your willingness to go through not just this hearing, but to dedicate your lives for the next few years and to the public good. Ms. Touton, I want to just first start and say that I have two letters that I'd like to submit to the congressional record. Both are in support of yourself for Commissioner of Reclamation. The first comes from the Southern Ute Indian Tribe in Colorado. The second from the Southeastern Colorado Water Conservancy District. And both speak incredibly highly of the public service work that Ms. Touton has done, her mastery of complex Western water issues that defy any rules of complexity, and her unique ability to work with diverse parties towards productive solutions. And she's got a long record of success. My staff has shared electronic versions with the committee, and I certainly hope committee members get a chance to look at these and appreciate your including these in the record. Then Ms. Daniel Davis. Last week we saw the BLM's long-awaited announcement on its headquarters, and the announcement of a regional headquarters out west, I think helps ensure that Westerners are going to have a direct say in how much of our Western land is, how the federal government oversees much of that Western land. But I think it's important that leadership be out there and reside in that Western headquarters. So I wanted to ask you whether you could just speak for a moment. I realize this is, that the appropriator is going to have a large role in this, but can you speak to the value you see both for the Western states and the country and for BLM in having some senior BLM leadership located out in Grand Junction, Colorado?
Senator, thanks so much for asking that question. And I really appreciated your engagement and input in the conversations we've had on this issue. I think, as you know, the Secretary has asked us to prioritize both the functionality of BLM, which was really impacted by a reorganization that led to literally hundreds of personnel departing the agency, and the promises of job creation in Grand Junction were not realized. So I think in our analysis and our process, where we've talked to a lot of employees, we've talked to many, many stakeholders, including in Grand Junction. I know the Secretary was there with you on a visit, and we undertook formal tribal consultation. I think we were trying to understand how we could best help the Bureau be successful. We ask it to do an awful lot. As far as the Western headquarters in Grand Junction, I think we agree that we want it to be a robust presence there. That's very important. We want it to grow, and agree that we should have senior BLM leaders there. As you point out, we have yet to progress, but hope to start soon the formal reprogramming process with the appropriators. I hope that we'll stay engaged with you and the rest of the delegation in talking about this. But I think we're in agreement about what we want it to be a robust Western headquarters, while at the same time feeling that it's important that BLM have its key leadership also in Washington, along with the rest of the other land agencies.
Absolutely. And the Secretary is now legendary in Colorado, because when she came to visit, she not only showed up at events in very small towns, but she stayed. And that was noticed and reported all over the state. And I don't think we've seen a cabinet secretary go out into the community in the same way that she did and really listen to people. So very impressive. I'll finish this, I think it's of value not just to Colorado, but to all the western states, and maybe a deputy director. I know that at one point there were some discussions about a third deputy director being created and looking at things like conservation and land management and relationship with the tribes is a possibility. Now, just quickly, Ms. Bronin, I couldn't help but note that you're an advisor to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And little known fact, in my previous life, I took historic buildings and turned them into brew pubs. And in, I think it was 1997, got the Award of Honor from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And I saw that you, as an advisor, that I just wanted to ask you a question as to the role of historic preservation in economic development. And you only got about 10 seconds, so we'll give you an extra 10 seconds if the chair will allow you to run over just a little bit.
Thank you, Senator. And yes, I'm familiar. It's not a little known fact with the way that you transformed downtown Denver through your conversions and including, I believe, the use of the federal historic preservation tax credit in your projects. Preservation has a significant role in economic development. You see that through the tax credit, and as I mentioned in my opening remarks, $173 billion in private development. You see that in the jobs that have been created. You see that, again, just looking at the federal tax credit alone, not even counting state tax credits, the creation of 172,000 units of low-income and moderate affordable housing. So besides the rehabilitation jobs, besides the jobs that your projects and others around the country have created, we see heritage tourism being a tremendous force already, one that is increasingly jeopardized by disaster response issues that I'm happy to talk about maybe later. But this is something that we need to protect. It's something that our laws need to protect, and it's something that, as chair of the advisory council, I hope to ensure that we're looking at from all angles to ensure that private investment continues.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. And now we have Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Daniel Davis, I'd like to start with you, if that's all right. Looking forward to seeing the results of your review of the oil and gas leasing program. One of the things that I'm concerned about is I want to make sure that certain actions aren't undertaken that could end up inhibiting bidding to a degree that would essentially amount to a de facto ban. Would you agree that that sort of thing can happen? That if you increase burdens on the program sufficiently, you could end up with a de facto ban? For example, if developers don't have adequate time to develop under the terms, or if you add enough reviews to slow down the process even further, if you raise royalty rates above market, at some point you could see these factors combining enough to the point you'd have a de facto ban, couldn't you?
So, Senator, I'm always hesitant to comment on market factors. I think what I would say is that I think that the process of review associated with oil and gas leasing is important. For the onshore program, you have a program where royalty rates haven't been raised in 100 years. So, those kind of fiscal underpinnings, which have been looked at carefully by the GAO and our ONIG, are things that we are looking at.
Yeah, I understand that, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate your commitment to doing it and to being thorough in it. And I understand that you can't forecast now what the conclusions are going to be. Just asking a more theoretical question. At some point, you could add to the regulatory obligations attending it to the point that you could end up really chilling activity or even thwarting it. In theory, if somebody raised the royalty rates high enough to make it not economical, for example.
Yeah, I think, the main thing that I'm concerned about is that we are providing a fair return to taxpayers for the use of what's a shared public resource. So I think if we're fair and balanced in our approach and what we're looking at and the conclusions we reach, I know that state royalty rates are significantly higher. So I think if we're careful and fair in our analysis and the conclusions we draw, I expect that activity will continue.
Okay. So in that case, you can commit that federal leasing and development will continue, and that changes to the program won't be put in place to make it uneconomical to continue.
I think as you know, we talked about, we're still in the process of review, and we're looking at a lot of different aspects of the program, from, the fiscal aspects to transparency issues to compliance with environmental laws and accounting for climate impacts. And we are in the middle of that review. We hope to complete it very soon.
But you are willing to commit that you're not going to deliberately make it uneconomical by virtue of regulatory restrictions?
I think that that's not the purpose of our process at all, no.
Now, in conducting the review of the oil and gas leasing program, has the department assessed or will it assess what potential changes to fuel prices that new regulations might bring about? And if so, can you talk to us about what your findings were on that?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. And again, I'm not, really in a position to talk about findings or conclusions. We've tried to undertake a really comprehensive review, have talked directly to industry, many other stakeholders, tribal consultation, state officials, and are trying to, complete a comprehensive review that takes into account, all of the factors associated with the program, many of which you've just mentioned.
Okay. And that's great that you're willing to consider them. And again, consistent with my earlier questions that dealt specifically with the need to not add regulations, I would hope that would be a factor you'd take into account. That if the cumulative burden of the regulatory obligations that are placed on there by the government, taking into account fluctuations in fuel prices, I hope those things could be taken into account, and that you'd be willing to share your findings on that when you do get to a conclusion.
Senator, if we do undertake a regulatory process, that kind of analysis is going to be very, very important.
And then finally, will comments submitted to the Department of the Interior on the department's review of the oil and gas program ever be made public, and if so, when?
Thanks for that follow-up. And our intention, again, when the process is complete and the report is made public, we do intend to make comments public that we've received, yes.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And now we have Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This first question is for Ms. Touton. It's good to be speaking with you again. As you stated in your testimony, the Interior Department recently announced its first ever drought restrictions on the Colorado River. These cutbacks hit Arizona the hardest. We expected that. Beginning next year, Arizona loses 18% of our Colorado River water supply, and we get 40% of our water from the Colorado River. So fortunately, Arizona is prepared for these initial cutbacks under the drought contingency plan that Congress authorized in 2019. DCP funds drought mitigation projects that help states absorb these Tier 1 shortages. And last month, we passed in the Senate the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It fully funds the DCP and provides another $8 billion to repair our aging Western water infrastructure. It also promotes water recycling and water storage projects, desalination as well. We worked very hard to get that funding included. So if confirmed, how quickly do you feel that Reclamation can get this assistance out to Arizona?
Good morning, Senator. First, as an engineer, it's amazing to be represented with someone with a technical background like yourself, though my projects are stationary and yours are literally out of this world. Regarding how quickly we can get that assistance out. First, this year, want to commend the state of Arizona and all of your stakeholders and your constituents for what they're doing, recognizing what next year might look like. So we reprogrammed roughly $100 million for assistance this year, including an additional $20 million for DCP and $7 million to complete the 242 half wells in Arizona to help bring water online as early as next year. But the bipartisan infrastructure framework is a completely different level of investment in the Bureau of Reclamation. And should it be enacted into law, Senator, I commit to working with you, if confirmed, in moving those resources as expeditiously as possible.
Well, thank you. Lake Mead, as of this week, is at about 1,066 feet above sea level. So it's Tier 1, gets 1,050. Then we wind up in Tier 2 with further cutbacks, not only affecting Arizona, but some other states as well. So this funding in the bipartisan infrastructure bill is what we need. We haven't seen a drought like this, as you know, in centuries. We're 20 years into this now, and it's impossible to predict what's going to happen here in the future. But even with help from the DCP, farmers in central Arizona, primarily in Pinal County, will see cutbacks in water deliveries. And most of these farms are the main source of feed for dairy cattle, which is the largest agricultural commodity in our state. What assistance can reclamation provide to help farmers in central Arizona?
Thank you for that question. First, we have an amazing team in Phoenix in our area office who are engaged with your constituents, specifically the Pinal County farmers, on a weekly, if not daily basis on technical assistance. Part of our reprogramming was also Drought Relief Act funding that we've made available that certainly those farmers can also apply for. And finally, investments in Water Smart that they can also apply for, which was also included in the bipartisan infrastructure framework, is another assistance. And finally, projects like completing 242 half wells, bringing real water when it's needed.
Most of those Water Smart grants tend to go to California. It would be nice to see some equity there in how they're distributed based on need. So hopefully, if confirmed, you can take a close look at that, because central Arizona is, as far as Tier 1 of the drought contingency, central Arizona farmers are really feeling it the most. So thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Now we have Senator Langford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all of you and your families going through this process that you're going through. Senator Davis, I want to be able to just bring up a statement on something. You will be leading the area that has oversight of the Office of Surface Mining and Reclamation. That's important to us in Oklahoma in a whole new way, because after the McGirt decision, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, the state of Oklahoma, the tribes, all received a letter from the Office of Surface Mining and Reclamation that surprised everyone, that it came in redefining a section of McGirt that is a criminal decision to also move to a regulatory issue. Now, I've engaged with the solicitor's office to see what else is coming, and they've given me assurances nothing else is coming. But the key thing that I want to really be able to ask you is, we all understand there's an ongoing conversation about McGirt, but we don't like being caught off guard and for things just showing up from the federal government without some consultation with the state or with the tribes. So what I just want to be able to make a statement back to you is, in Oklahoma, we hate surprises. And I'm assuming that everybody's going to stick to their word on this to say if there's a conversation about things that are connected to McGirt, that the tribes in the state will be kept in the loop. Is that correct?
Senator, thank you. I too hate surprises, so I hear you, and I commit that we will be in touch and not surprise you.
That's great. We'll just stay in contact on that in the days ahead. There's an interesting thing that came down, actually. That was a memo that you put out March the 19th of 2021 this year from the Department of Interior. And it deals with how people will actually get permission to be able to do routine matters in oil and gas development. There was a secretarial order that was put in place, 3395, that expired in March. It was replaced with this memo, which you signed on it, basically saying that the office that you now being nominated for would be the office that would have to clear all these different requests. And you gave a long list of the different things, but then added this statement to it. This is not an exhaustive list of actions requiring review by the ASL, Assistant Secretary, Land and Minerals. So the question that I have is, there's been a lot of confusion about this memo, about what it includes, what it doesn't include, because you include a long list, but say, hey, it's not exhaustive on this. Now that you're moving to that position, can you help us bring some clarity? What does this include? Because as I've talked to some of the folks that do oil and gas development, they said there were routine requests that were put in, like gas gathering lines and other things that were routine, that were decided down by career professionals that are now being pushed up, and they're a lot slower to be able to get those approvals now. So I guess this is really a twofold question. What all is going to be included in this? Are the routine items no longer routine? They've all got to be pushed up to the assistant secretary's level. Are the career folks going to be cut out of all this decision making? And how long is it going to take to be able to get answers back to basic routine questions that were simple to get in the past, but are no longer simple?
Thank you so much, Senator, for the opportunity to provide some clarity to that memo. I think, first of all, I wanted to the Secretarial Order 3395, which provided for elevated review at the beginning of the administration, that was really an opportunity for us as new appointees to get a handle on what was happening across the agency, across the department, and various activities. It expired, and the memo is actually a return, sort of a return to consistent practice across administrations. And I just want to assure you, we value our career employees, our career partners so much. We actually talked to them about this and said, and my management philosophy is that the more clarity you can bring to processes and sharing of your expectations so that people know what how they're trying to meet the goals of a new administration, the better. And we sought input and asked whether a memo like this that acknowledged that with frequency across administrations, significant matters are elevated for departmental level review, but it is not the business of this office to be in the day-to-day permitting business. And I think there was some confusion during the period of the secretarial order, but again, this is a memo. It's both consistent with my management approach. I think it's consistent, we're told, with how previous administrations manage and make clear that significant matters should be elevated, and again, providing the kind of clarity for people going forward in their work.
I would only say, when I've talked to folks in industry, they have noticed a significant difference, that they're not getting answers back to questions anymore. That used to be routine, that used to be fairly rapid turnaround, to be predictable in the time period. Now it's an unpredictable time period. So I've heard before, hey, this goes back to previous, but for folks in industry, they're saying, no, this is not functioning as it did previously. Routine matters are not being solved routinely anymore. And as you know well from business, you've got to have some kind of predictability. It does kill investment to just say, we'll get a decision to you when we get it to you, because in oil and gas, it's very dependent on capital. It's very dependent on the price at that time period. And if you start to do development, then you don't know when you're going to get an answer. You just won't do development on it. So it is an easy way to be able to cut off development. It's just to cut off or make it unpredictable when you'll get an answer to a question. But it is different than what has happened in the past.
Thank you very much for that feedback, Senator. My view from where I sit has been that permitting and things like permitting of gathering lines has proceeded apace, but I appreciate the feedback. And
Thank you.
Senator Murkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here this morning. Ms. Daniel Davis, I want to follow on what Senator Langford has been asking with regards to this memo. And you have indicated that you are seeking to basically continue the practice across previous administrations and seeking to build out clarity. And you've told Senator Langford you appreciate his input here, and I will add to that input in terms of, again, the lack of certainty, the delays that come with it, just not knowing when and who effectively is the decision maker here. When we had Secretary Holland before the committee, she made very clear, I think, to each and every one of us on this committee, that it was going to be her practice to follow the science. It was going to be her practice to place the trust in the field experts that we have out there. Not that Alaska is that much more unique than Oklahoma, but it is unique in many, many ways when it comes to accessing our resources and some of the laws that have overlay there. And so this particular issue is very concerning to us because it does not appear that you are allowing for that guidance from the field to be adhered to. You're not allowing the science to be adhered to. You're basically pulling everything back to Washington, D.C. for a political review. And whether it is with regards to the action in the NPRA, what we saw with the public land orders, you know how intense many of us feel about that decision. The oil and gas program leasing in the 1002 area. So I'm not certain that your response to Senator Lankford has provided any more clarity to me about what you really mean this process to be, because the direction that you seem to be taking, that the administration seems to be taking, is that we're going to pull things back to Washington, D.C., and if it takes longer, it takes longer. And if those that are seeking to invest the capital look at this and say this isn't worth the investment, it is kind of a, well, that's too bad type of an approach. Tell me why I should feel differently about my perspective right now.
Thank you so much, Senator, for the question. It's nice to see you again. I think that generally we are committed to following the science. We're committed to following the law. Specific to the permitting issues that have been raised, I'm not aware of any ongoing permitting delays. So I want to be clear about that in terms of the work that is done at the state level and the work that those offices do.
If we can, I'm sure we'd be happy to provide some examples, and Senator Lankford, I'm sure you can probably provide some from Oklahoma as well. And again, there is a concern that it used to be that you could count on your Alaska BLM folks. You could go to them, you walk it through, and you can get an answer back. We're not seeing that anymore. So I don't know where that's gone to, but it certainly is not in place right now. Let me move on, because I do have a whole host of different issues. I have to bring up the Willow project because, as you know, this is probably the singular most important development project in the state of Alaska right now and going forward. We do appreciate the Secretary and the Department and their efforts to defend the Willow permitting process that's been conducted. We're working through next steps with regard to the court decision on the litigation. But I just want you to commit to me that you intend to prioritize these processes and keep them on a reasonable and a predictable schedule.
Thank you, Senator. I know how important this project is to you, and we intend to work closely with the BLM Alaska office, who is looking at the ruling and moving forward with next steps in a timely manner.
Well, know that this is not just important to me, but it's important to the entire state.
Understood.
During our meeting a couple months ago now, I raised my frustration, and I think you sense not only frustration but real anger about some of the reports that I had received regarding virtual consultations held by BLM with some of our Native tribes and corporations to discuss the potential revocations or modifications of our public land orders. And I raised these concerns about these tribal consultations because we had learned that there were uninvited environmental organizations that were listening in on these consultations, including a former employee of one of the BLM political officials that was leading the consultation. You indicated that you agreed that this was absolutely inappropriate. You would find out what was going on. You'd report back to us. So this is now your opportunity to report back to us. What did you do when you got back to the department and raised this? And how can you assure me that that really you are going to take tribal consultation as seriously as it needs to be if you're confirmed?
Thank you, Senator. I appreciated your raising that issue to me because, as I said to you at the time, and I'll reiterate here, it is inconsistent with appropriate formal consultation practice to have anyone other than tribal leaders or tribal member that the leader has asked to appear, or, as you know, sometimes, sort of a consultant or a lawyer may appear, but again, as asked to by the tribal leader. So I did go back and ask and understood that it may have been that the folks managing the consultation weren't aware in a timely manner of sort of unauthorized people on the phone.
Do you find that acceptable?
I don't. And what we did is we have reminded everyone of the ground rules for formal consultation, and we have also reminded people that it's sort of imperative to police such things and that they have the ability and should exercise it to dump people off the call. I guess I'll say it that way. And we have had to, talk about this across the department because, as you know, every program is engaging in formal tribal consultation. So I appreciate, again, you're bringing it to our attention. It's allowed us in this remote environment to make what we think and hope are improvements to the consultation process. We do take it very seriously.
Well, you should take it seriously. I found it shocking, just really shocking and disturbing, and it just sends a message, unfortunately, that the consultation is not being handled in a manner that most of us would expect. Mr. Chairman, I have several more questions. My time has expired, so I will submit these for the record. But Ms. Daniels, you had indicated in response to a previous senator here that this oil and gas report that we have been waiting for was going to be in early summer. Secretary Holland testified before the committee that it's being finalized internally. We're going to be seeing it very soon. I'm told that in your response to yet another inquiry today, you say it's going to be out here soon. I've given up asking on this because it's almost laughable at this point in time in terms of what the answers are. So I'm assuming you still don't have anything more definitive that you can give in terms of an actual date that we can look forward to.
So thanks for the opportunity to talk about where we are in the process. And as I said previously, a report like this that occurs at the direction of an executive or of the president is reviewed by interagency and White House process, and that's appropriate and expected. And we are working our way through that and incorporating additional information as it comes forward. And I don't have a hard date for you as far as release.
Sounds like it's taking even longer than the Secretary had thought earlier this summer. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Hoven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Ms. Daniel Davis, you were involved with the implementation of the leasing moratorium, is that correct?
Senator, I was guided by the executive order from the president. We did pause leasing for a period of time, yes.
Do you agree with the Biden administration's call on OPEC Plus, including Saudi Arabia and Russia, to increase their production to stabilize energy prices? So do you agree with the Biden administration's approach that we should not produce oil and gas in this country where we have better environmental standards and instead ask Russia and Saudi Arabia to increase their production where they have worse environmental standards so that we can rely on them instead of produce it here at home? Do you agree with that approach? Is that the right energy approach for this country?
So I don't really feel confident in the foreign affairs space, but I can say that we have moved forward with leasing, both onshore and offshore.
Pardon me?
We're moving forward with leasing onshore and offshore.
Because the court ordered you to.
That's correct.
My question was, do you agree with an approach where we force energy development offshore to our adversaries and become dependent on them? Do you think that's a good approach for our energy policies and places where there's worse environmental standards?
So I think the president's view is that there's a global energy market and a global climate crisis, and he has measures that he's taking and undertaking to address both of those. And again, foreign affairs is not really my space, so I can tell you that I'm comfortable with the path we're taking in moving forward with responsible oil and gas leasing that takes into account environmental concerns and
So the
requirements.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Not at all.
So your approach is that the solution to the greenhouse gas emissions and environmental standards is to force energy production out of this country to countries with worse environmental standards, and you think that's the right approach?
So we've looked actually carefully at the numbers, and production has continued at pace. It is at the same level, sometimes even higher than the previous administration, and permitting has continued at the same level as well. So the oil and gas leasing program on federal lands is ongoing.
So it's your contention that if you put a moratorium to prevent more development, just as much energy will be developed? That's what you're saying?
I'm saying that there's not a pause or a moratorium, and I'm aware that production has continued at an even, consistent level across the board.
In spite of your efforts, in spite of the administration's efforts to curtail it, is what you're saying?
So production was actually not part of the leasing program, and it was never ongoing. Permits continued to be processed, and indeed, we've processed over 4,000 this fiscal year, and there are 9,000 available for use. So we have continued to pace with the program.
So it's your contention that if you continued the moratorium, that would not reduce energy production in this country?
I'm not really comfortable speculating about something that hasn't happened and may not happen. So I'd rather not go there. I just want to reiterate.
So you're I'm sorry.
No, go, sir.
So you're completely comfortable with the approach we've just discussed?
I may be a little bit lost in the approach. The approach with continuing leasing and production.
Curtailing energy production here, forcing it to countries, our adversaries, where they have lower environmental standards, and then becoming dependent on them for our energy. You're comfortable with that approach?
So we are moving, production has continued, and we are moving forward with leasing. And
because you were forced to by the court.
Senator Hoeven, if I could just interrupt, because I think you weren't here earlier. I'd asked those questions, and you might want to reiterate. Is our production the same or greater than it had been before the pause?
Well, Mr. Chairman, she answered that, but the point is, if you continue the moratorium, you are going to reduce production. But I appreciate your point.
I know where you're going.
Yeah, and I did pick up her making that point. Do you realize also, Ms. Daniel Davis, that if somebody has private minerals and there are federal minerals intertwined, that moratorium holds up that private individual's ability to develop their own resources as well? Are you aware of that? So you also are affecting private individuals and their ability, to utilize their property lawfully. Are you aware of that?
I am familiar with the split estate issue, which I believe you're referencing, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Touton, we have a lot of water projects going in our state, very important to us. I guess my question is, will you work with us on funding those projects, and will you come to our state to learn about them and work with us?
Good morning, Senator. It's good to see you again. I've enjoyed working with you in your office in the past, and if confirmed, I look forward to visiting your state and working with you on these issues in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate you working with us in the past, and I want to extend that invitation for you to come see us, when it works for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bronin, both in our park, we're working on a number of things regarding tourism, Roosevelt Library, a number of things there. And then also, of course, we have 5 reservations in our state. And so I would like to invite you to our state as well and ask that you would work with us, both in our, obviously, with our Native American population, North Dakota, and their tribal preservation activities, as well as in our national parks in our state. So again, would you work with us, and will you come to our state and visit us so you can learn more about what we're doing?
Senator, thank you so much for the invitation, and I look forward to working with your office and visiting. Thank you.
Thank you, and Ms. Daniel Davis, I appreciate your answers. Obviously, we have a disagreement in in approach, but I do appreciate your responding to me. Thank you.
Senator, I appreciate the questions very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And I want to thank all three of our nominees and your families for enduring. And I think it was a very good hearing. You all did a great job. We appreciate it very much. Members will have until 6 o'clock p.m. tomorrow to submit additional questions for the record, and the committee officially stands adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.